the following the gut. So I say this often on the show, and then I'll segue it to something directly related to your work. I often say, I don't trust my own mind. It's not that I completely distrust it and I think I'm always wrong. It's just that, as I think you'll appreciate as much as anybody, there's so much going on. All those experiences you talked about, that lens we see the world through, external, internal, ego issues, insecurities, biases, all these things. It's so hard to have clarity on what is truly right for us or what we actually think. So that gut feel, I totally get it. And I think there's a ton of value in it, but it always makes me a little nervous because I worry, like, is that actually objectively, the right way to look at it? And I think tying it to jump into it, to what you do and kind of the toxic workplace and the anti-bullying, there's a part of me when I think about that I wonder, and I listened to a podcast you did earlier today. I think it was called Lead On To Me. I forget exactly what it was, but it was an awesome podcast. I'll put it in the show notes because I really thought it was great. And I thought the information you said was really good. But I couldn't help but think, like, for some bullies, let's just use that term, are they following their gut feel? Like, to them, it feels right to yell at somebody or call them out in a meeting or to lash out or do those things. So how do you reconcile that piece of it, of following the gut feel, but having that good bit of caution to be like, maybe I shouldn't just do that, right?
This is a great conversation. I love this. As we were saying, that your right answer could change day by day. So what's happening with people who bully is that they have been fighting for something their whole life. I have found that pattern to be true in every single person I've coached. They've been fighting for something, whether it was the love of their parent. I had one woman who came from another country, didn't speak English. She fought her way through PhD and, has a great position now. So that they all have this like backstory of fighting for something. And so what I've discovered in coaching them is they're still fighting. They live in uber fear of being seen as incompetent. And so they're fighting for something. So for them, they've learned that they can get results by leading the way that they lead, by the yelling or the bullying. And so it does feel right to them when I first meet them. And they are often kind of like, yeah, I know people think I'm hard, but it is what it is. I get results. They've also been rewarded for that behavior because the people I coach are high level. These are executive VPs, CEOs, highly valuable to the organization. And so it's worked for them. So their right answer has gotten a little off course. And my job is to help them see the impact of their behavior and how it's actually the wrong choice. And so I do that by doing 360s. And then I present that data to them. And I basically say, I interviewed 15 people and here's how they perceive you. And through that process, they can see that they've lost their way. And I often say that to them straight out. They'll say things like, I can't believe this is me. I'm mortified. You must think I'm a horrible person. And I would say, no, I don't. I think you lost your way,
So what's the like practical, if somebody's listening and they're not an executive, they're not in that position, or maybe they can't afford a coach. Like if they're trying to figure out for themselves, let's assume they've gotten to a point where they're like, maybe I should question a little bit and see, am I a bully? Am I approaching this wrong? Have I lost my way? Is there a way to do that individually? Or do you think you need like external forces that you can look to give you the guidance? Like, is it possible for people to correct their course on their own, you think?
Yeah, I think there is. So, what do they say? If you don't know who the village idiot is, it's probably you. So if you feel like there's turnover in your department, or you kind of think about your relationships at work and they feel strained, but you're not really sure why, it's natural for us to say, well, it's them, it's the context I'm in. But if there's a pattern you notice around you, then it's probably you, because you're the common denominator. So that's one way. My first book, Back Off, actually has a little assessment in there. I'll have to track it down and you can put it in the links of the show. I do have an assessment, Are You a Bully? And it was at one point my number one viewed LinkedIn post. I'll have to track it down.
Because back to that point about trusting your own mind, because again, what I always worry about is that like our minds will find out. It'll find excuses to be like, exactly like you said, it's not me, it's somebody else. And I love what you're saying. I heard somebody say once, and I'm not going to remember who it is, but this idea of like, they compared it to like a fighter pilot, where they have to check their instruments, because when you're flying at a certain altitude with the air coverage the way it is, like you literally can't see. You can't trust your own eyes to know if you're about to fly into a mountain. So you need these instruments to tell you like, hey, your altitude's getting low, or you're getting close to something. And it was a beautiful parallel to exactly what I think you're saying, which is sometimes you need those external instruments, like an assessment, like a coach, like whatever it is. And that's what I find so interesting, like that ability for people. I genuinely wonder, like, do people really have the ability on their own to what you were saying before, those people that are fighting for something their whole lives, when it's a deep rooted like ego insecurity that exists there, can their minds actually allow them to access that on their own and realize that they have some issue to work through?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. So that, what I was saying at the beginning is I'm really good at asking myself what I could have done differently. And that comes with the self-confidence that I have. So if you're if you're very anxious about competence and people seeing you as the smartest person in the room and all of that, and you actually have a lot of insecurities, it's going to be super hard for you to be willing to look at yourself. And I'm sure any listener right now might be thinking about a friend or a spouse even that's very defensive, and that defensiveness is a sign of lack of self-confidence and self-esteem. And so the more confident, and there's tons of research on this, the more confident you are, the more you can take a look at yourself, and then it's sort of chicken egg. The more you take a look at yourself, the more confident you are. So people with an external locus of control who essentially have given control of their lives to all of the forces and people around them, they have less confidence. And then it's a spiral effect. So, but that's, the coaching that I do is hard. And there are plenty who are still super defensive about that feedback, and I can't help them. And I always email the contact who hired me in to say, look, they're not buying into the feedback. So until they do, I can't help you. Versus others who are just like, I didn't know it was so awful. And yes, please help me. So.